Good afternoon. It's Friday. It's October the 19th, 2018, and this is what they call a vlog. It's a video blog or something. Anyway, the idea is that I want to, in a very short video presentation, download to you what many of you have been calling me about or wanting to talk about, which is the Small and Medium-Sized Organizations Fund that Global Affairs Canada initiated approximately a year ago in November. Many of you applied, some of you didn't apply, some of you are thinking you might want to apply in the future. And so what I wanted to do is tell you what we know. Remember the disclaimer always is that we're not the government. We are a council that has we have good conversations with the government, but we're not the government. So I can only tell you what I've heard, which may be more than what you've heard. So that's the spirit of what I'm trying to do right now. Share with you what I've heard. So the first thing we've heard is that they got a lot of applications. They got 196 eligible applications, ones that they had to look at. Not sure how many in total came in, but some were just clearly not eligible. Of the 196 eligible applications, 22 have moved forward to be considered for funding and are busily writing their proposals right now. You might be one of those groups. So no, there's 21 other groups if you're one of those that's right now trying to get your proposal refined in a final proposal writing that would land in the first or second week of November. And then presumably you'll get assessed, finally assessed. You've gone through the preliminary assessment. And then presumably after that sometime you'd get some money. And do not ask me when. I have no idea. Hopefully though, it'd be within this fiscal year, before March 31st, 2019. That would be my hope. For those of you who didn't get the funding, the first thing is don't think that it's bad news. First of all, it's great news that there were that many of you that applied, because that sends a very strong message. Keep in mind that this Small and Medium-Sized Organizations Fund is bundled into 3 different components. One is a development impact window, and that's what you applied for. And that was to generally support small and medium-sized organizations to go out and do their work in a responsive way, largely oriented towards women and girls and the Feminist International Assistance Policy, but responsive nevertheless. Responsive meaning that it's your idea and the government will choose to support your idea, versus a call, which is their idea, and you kind of like a contractor try to apply to get it, okay? So the responsive nature of that is really good. The second thing is that there are 2 other components, and originally it's kind of weird, right? Because the other 2 components are a capacity development fund, which is essentially supposed to be helping small and medium-sized organizations develop their capacity to do this kind of international work. And in some ways, that would have been a good fund to roll out first so that you would all have excellent capacity in terms of writing the proposals to meet the results-based management frameworks and the budgetary and the logic frames and all the things that they would like in their proposal. We could have done some capacity building with that fund so that you would have had the best proposals possible to land on their desk. Now that's not happening. I shouldn't say it's not happening. It's not happening yet. It's being fiercely pushed right now by people to try and get it off the ground. But the priority was to get these development impact ones out the window. That was worth, out of the full 100 million, that was worth about 79, I think it was, million was for this development impact window. And my understanding is that the current call, the first call that went out, will probably chew up over $40 million of that. That's what I understand. 22 groups, all of them asking for pretty close to a couple $1 million, right? So to do the math, it's going to be somewhere in there. I don't know the exact number, but it's a significant chunk of the money. So the first thing to understand is that there will not be 4 calls. Originally they said, we're going to do 4 calls, and this is the first of 4. And we're going to pace it all out. Well, they found so many applied in the first round, and a significant number of those are pretty good proposals, is what we understand. So they have gone, okay, there's not going to be as many rounds. Now, for any of you who watched our previous vlogs and thought, you're going to save your efforts for the second round in some ways, I encourage you to get in now. At this point, we were told that it would be paced. It's not obviously being paced, so get in on the second round. That's my advice to you. Don't wait. And for those of you who are in the first round and got a rejection, don't wait for the third and fourth rounds. Get in there now for this next round. And the next round, we're told, will probably happen in January in the new year, or somewhere in the new year. Now, it was supposed to come out right now. They were supposed to put out a call in November, and they're going to put out a call in October, and then a call following October, and it would sort of be a fall intake. What they've recognized is that this last intake, I mean, it must have been rather tumultuous for them, right? You have to process 196 of these applications. The process wasn't perfect, and they got a lot of feedback from groups and from the councils that the process needs to be improved. So what they're trying to do is work with us, and I'll explain a little bit what we're doing, to try and get that process improved so that when the new call comes out in January, it's a better call. So the good news is if you didn't go in the first call and you're coming in the second call, it might be easier and better. So you didn't necessarily lose by waiting. And hopefully you, in the last year, have been better preparing yourself to put in a better call anyway. Because, and you should know that it will probably be significantly competitive because a lot of people will just tweak their proposals and pop them in again. And there'll be some new players coming on board. So there could be well over 200 new proposals in this second call. Like I said, the good news here and the bigger message is that that is not a bad thing. That is an excellent thing because that is exactly why we told the minister that they need to have a $100 million fund because there's a huge, what they call absorptive capacity in our sector for small and medium-sized groups to do the great work that you do. So hopefully they're getting the message. There's a lot of Canadians out there that with very little support from the Canadian government can go a long way in achieving some of our Canada's back objectives. So that's a positive message, and what I would encourage you to do if you are talking to federal officials or government people is, yes, there's problems with this fund, but on the other hand, the bigger message, lots of enthusiasm to do this work and lots of great proposals and lots of good groups, and they're getting the message. It's an overwhelming amount of energy out there. So good on you for writing those proposals. In terms of the actual proposal writing itself, I will say, wow, some of you must be angry in some ways because some of you got some rejections right off the top for very simple things like a signature page wasn't signed or something. And I can understand if you spend a month on this, how frustrating that might be. Let's just do a little real quick math. If you takes an average group, small group, let's say a month for a person to write a proposal, and that's not outrageous. That would be a minimal amount of person hours. In fact, many of you are going to say, took me way longer than that, because by the time you add up all the people you got involved in your Southern partners, it's a significant time period. Now take 196 proposals, of which you got to knock off 22. We did the calculation of how many person years of proposal writing just happened that was not going to move forward. I think it worked out to more than 16 years that's been of time and energy in proposal writing. Now we've pointed that out to government and said, look, you can't keep doing this. You can't go to a sector which is small and medium-sized organizations and get them all writing proposals and take all that time and energy out of this sector, which could have been doing good, legitimate work, and give them such an onerous proposal writing process, and then only a few of them are getting funded. It's not right. That's actually a net drain on the system, and you're setting up false expectations and not putting a hell of a lot of pressure on groups. Now you know that. We've done some math on that, and we've made that absolutely clear, as clear as we can to government, that it's got to be streamlined a little bit so that there's a letter of intake or there's a shorter process. You're not having to put out a month and a half of work. Do gender analysis, do an environmental analysis, do results-based management, do a risk analysis, do project management, project measurement framework, all that stuff that you had to do. Let me just say, I'm feeling for you because I've done these before and it's painful to get a no. So I'm sorry for those of you that didn't even get the opportunity to even have your proposals looked at because of some kind of minor technical rejection. Hopefully that's never going to happen again. But if it does, we got to put some pressure on these guys not to let that be a reason why a proposal doesn't go through. Particularly when the technical requirements for some of these proposal writing it's onerous. For those of you who got a letter, and I think most of you who got a rejection letter, you got a letter that said you're not going to get funded, and you might have got like a really generalized comment that didn't really tell you what you could do to improve your proposal. Again, I'm feeling for you because, you put a lot of effort in and then you don't get enough feedback to be able to improve. There's no lessons learned. There's no way to move forward. There's no way to know, am I a fundable organization? Are they ever going to fund me? Is it useless to fund again? I mean, to apply again? Because I'm never, that's the questions that's going on in your head. And we've made it clear to them, look, you got to give some feedback. you have to give some feedback to some of these groups that put that much time in. And what they've said to us is, okay, let's do this, because they're overwhelmed too. 196 groups wanting feedback in the middle of a proposal writing process. They're trying to get the monies out the door and they're trying to get things flowing. This is overwhelming. So what has been suggested is that they're going to give some webinars in which they can generally give all of you some feedback about some of the trends and things that they found. So, and some of the things that they're looking for, so that you've got a better idea. And then after that, if a group says, well, I still want some very specific questions answered about my proposal, then you could go and arrange for a debriefing on the specific nature. But in order to be able to kind of capture some of the generalized questions that probably all of you have, it's easier to do that in some sort of one-stop shopping webinars. So we're going to try and offer that. And the way that that will probably roll out is through a live streaming webinar that it will happen in conjunction with the Together 2018 conferences that are going around the country, and the main one being in Alberta. We're not doing that in British Columbia. We are way too busy right now to do it Together 2018, and kudos to all the groups that are doing it. We will, however, provide the information to any of our member groups on how to be able to get access to this live streaming. If this video is not informative enough and you want to be able to be part of those, and I would suggest that you do. So we are also involved with one of the things that we did, just to understand what we've been trying to do on your behalf, is in the summertime, an excellent letter was penned by the Ontario Council and vetted by all the other councils that went forward to the Global Affairs, really outlining their concerns that this wasn't moving forward, because 30 weeks is a long time for people to wait. And some of the things that we've heard back from you is that you write your proposal in the context of a planting season or a context even that's happening on the ground. And if you don't even hear for almost 3/4 of a year, it throws your planning. You're unable to be able to figure out how's your program going to roll out. And you need to also manage expectations with Southern partners who just spent a bunch of time writing a proposal in the hopes that they're going to get this money. So we wrote them back and we said, look, this is not good, and also there's an onus on you guys to spend this money to get it moving, and blah blah blah. And what since then in September, a lot of you got your responses, and so then I wrote quite a detailed letter to them to say, look, the feedback we're getting is not very good on this, and I outlined a whole series of issues and suggestions, and then we met in Ottawa. Many of us, not all of the councils, but many of the councils met in Ottawa with the key people to try and figure out a really healthy way forward. And I think there is a good way forward here. One is not just to tell you how you did things wrong, that you didn't write your proposal this way or you didn't write that, but also to tell them this is how your proposal intake process could really be fixed. So it's a two-way communication. We need to get that information from you. And so what we're going to be doing is sending out a survey with the Intercouncil network of provincial and regional councils. That's all of the provincial regional councils like BCCIC and the Canadian Council for International Cooperation. We're going to send out a joint survey, which you're going to get. And I would really encourage you to fill it out and fill out the comments so we get the information that we can feed to government and say this is what's going on. And we're going to be doing that. The draft is out today. It should go out next week. You should have, maybe by the time you're watching this video, it's even something you can click on, hopefully, and fill it out. And then we're going to collate the results from that. And then in November, we've got a big meeting planned, face-to-face meeting in Ottawa, where we can really sit down and go, let's figure out exactly how to improve the second call. And then they can implement that, and the second call can come out in January. And we can start to get this system improved, lessons learned, all that stuff, right? To give you another idea of a couple other things that are going on is that the original $100 million has an innovation fund component to it, and it has a development impact window, and it has a capacity development fund. The capacity development fund is in negotiation right now, and the Alberta Council will take a lead on organizing that. They're not going to run the whole thing in terms of it only happening in Alberta. It's meant to be for all Canadians, pan-Canadian effort, but they will take the lead. The same thing holds true for the innovation funds. The Manitoba Council is taking a lead on this. However, it's being done under the auspices of the Intercouncil Network. And so those two councils are rolling this out. The FIT program, which is the Innovation Fund, is a little further ahead than the Capacity Development Fund, and we may see some movement on that fairly quickly. It's deep in negotiation right now. Hopefully it's going to work. And you'll see some, you should see some of that rolling out in the new year fairly quickly. The capacity development, ironically, that's the one we should be doing first, right? That one is taking a little bit longer. And I would hope we're putting tons of pressure on, like, try and get this going, and I guess just be patient. That's the one that's very exciting in terms of us being able to share amongst ourselves lessons learned, learn how to peer support each other in our sector amongst small and medium-sized organizations so that we better develop our collective game. That's the idea behind that one. And it should be a good fund to have. So those are the things coming up. You got a webinar, you got a survey, you've got a council government interaction meeting to try and improve how things go in the most transparent and forward way. I think it's been excellent. Government has been super responsive about wanting to fix these things and make them better and make them work better for them and make them work better for us. So we're keeping that dialogue open. There's a lot of transparency there. All the things that they're calling for, transparency and so on, they're trying to do. And there's also, just so you know, there's a couple other things that many of the councils and people are working on, which is there's kind of a group that meets around the CSO partnership that has been talking about trying to improve the way in which calls and funding works. It's around that. I sit on that along with a few other people, and what we're trying to do there is work with government at a deputy minister level to deeply analyze and put forward suggestions on how the Feminist International Assistance Policy could be better implemented. So it's like a implementation suggestion committee. And then there's another committee, there's some other subcommittees, and one of them is specifically on funding mechanisms and improving and streamlining funding. And that group is also meeting and getting some excellent work done to try and improve how things flow. So just to say this, and this is what I'm trying to get at, is if you wrote a proposal and you're frustrated, I feel your pain. It's very painful to write these and then get a no, and especially because of the amount of work that you're required to do. It does not mean that the entire project or the entire concept is flawed. It's getting fixed, and hopefully, and I can't say it will get fixed, but I'm saying there's people working on it. Try to get this thing to work better. And ultimately, what we want is more of you funded, right? And we want the sector well funded and substantially supported. And in order to do that, we need your feedback through this process via the councils to get government's ear and make this thing function better. Our dream is obviously to get more than 100 million. We know that there's way more energy out there than they ever assumed to make the world a better place through an SDG framework and an international development framework. So all the kudos to you for those of you who applied. Be patient for those of you who didn't apply. To hopefully this is useful. You've got a better idea. The competition's hot. There's lots of people out there going forward. I don't have the information on regional representation, how many groups from BC were funded. I think we only heard one group from British Columbia being funded. That's very disappointing for us. We don't know exactly where the other ones are. We'll find that out in the next couple of weeks and try to feed that back to you. We also don't really have a good idea of the types of projects, the nature of the projects that are being funded, because those groups are still being reviewed. They can't release that information to us, so I cannot share any intel or information on that would help you in terms of writing a prospective proposal in the future. I will say finally one other thing, which is that they are trying to spend money in some interesting ways. You know, like they have this $300 million that they want to spend on gender equality, and they've been going around the country trying to figure out from people, what is a good way to do this? What is a transparent way to move forward with that money? And in general, it's a lot easier for a government when they want to spend money to go to a multilateral like the United Nations and just write them a check. It's very easy, right? Because the whole accountability mechanism is established and it's clean and it's easy. Accountability with your own, ironically, accountability with your own Canadian partners has to go through a much more rigorous process to ensure that Canadians are treated fairly, properly in competitions, that things roll out. I mean, it's just way, way slower. So if you're trying to spend big chunks of change to make the world a better place, ironically, it's harder to spend it with your own fellow citizens than it is to write a check to UNICEF or to the World Food Program. So, having said that, the last thing we want to do is make it even worse. What we want to do is make it easier for them to work with us, work with their fellow Canadians, and support Canadians like you and your good groups and all the things that you're doing. So, with that in mind, if do the survey, and if you have any feedback that you can send our way, write me a note, write me an email. We're meeting all the time with these guys, and I bring your concerns to their attention all the time. I love it when you folks write, because I can go in and say, I won't name you, but I can say, this is what I'm hearing, is the experience. So I think I'm going to leave it at that, and thanks very much for watching. Keep it short, keep it simple, 20-minute presentation, and hopefully it's useful to you. May you have a very good weekend, and I hope that you guys do write these proposals in the future. Don't be put off. It's proposal writing. And for those of you who got a yes, excellent, good work.